Hi, I'm Amy Hannon, and nothing thrills me more than people and food. I'm a preacher's wife, a mom of 3, and I own my own specialty kitchen store. I've kept an open door and a well-stocked fridge, which means I have fed a lot of mouths over the years. So welcome to my kitchen. This is Cooking Today. Hi, welcome to my kitchen. I'm glad you're with me today. This is Cooking Today. Y'all are gonna love this today, y'all. This is the new one-pot dish. It's a sheet pan supper. Isn't that so smart? You know how we love the convenience of a crock pot or the convenience of just one big slow cooker or one big Dutch oven dish? This is a neat new cookbook actually that I have at Ribeyes called Sheet Pan Suppers, and this recipe is a little bit of a spin off of something that I read in her cookbook. Everything happens on this sheet pan, more or less. We do want to sear our meat. She doesn't sear her meat in her recipe. Shame. You know how I feel about good salted browned meat, right? And so I really like to have my meat seared. So we are going to do it in our skillet, and then the rest of it all happens right here on this sheet pan. So what you really need, this is kind of an equipment necessary meal, if that makes sense. So what you would have to have, which of course we have at Ribeyes because I use it all the time, is a baker's half sheet and the little chrome rack that sits right down on the inside. What we're going to do is wash this asparagus and put it up underneath this sheet pan, down underneath this rack. Then we're going to cook these broiled, beautiful ribeye steaks right on top in the oven. So all the good juice and all the seasoning and that good salty, savory liquid from the steak as it cooks, a little bit of that fat dripping that's delicious about a ribeye, is going to leak down into the meat, or leak down into the tray and help us roast this asparagus. The flavor of this is so good. This is high protein right here, gang, and it's really, really easy, super easy cleanup and really fresh. I got these beautiful steaks at Harps, of course. They have the most beautiful butcher area and they help, and I had them cut these down for me and they are really, really nice. So what I want to do is, actually first of all, I'm going to pop this out and we're just going to have our sheet pan. This is my Nordic Ware Prism sheet pan that I have at Ribeyes, and the reason I like to use this one is because it has those neat little ridges in it, and it gives a little bit of area up underneath your roasted vegetables or whatever you're making, and it helps kind of get a little air under there so that you know that you're getting some good air and cooking and roasting and all that. Doesn't get too soggy. Now let me tell you about this little trick real quick. I have 2 bundles of fresh asparagus. If you take an asparagus and you start to break it, it's going to snap at where it needs to come off, okay? So what you do is you do that on 1 or 2, maybe 3, just to get an idea about where it's a natural break to get the stalky part off to the nice tender part. And so I'm going to line those up, and instead of snapping every one of them, I'm just going to kind of line up the ones where they kind of naturally snapped and know that the rest of them in that bunch are going to snap off right about the same place. So we're just going to cut those down, and I'm going to go ahead and lay them in our sheet pan. Isn't that neat? That's a great little trick. So then I'm going to line them up and cut the stalky parts off. And we're going to line this pan. Now, what I've got going, my oven is preheated on 425, which is pretty high. We're not going to quite broil these. We're going to cook them on really high heat. And I went ahead and put my top rack up 1 notch. So we're closer to that top burner. So it's like we're kind of broiling, but we're not really broiling, but we're kind of treating it like a broil. That one doesn't look very good. And I'm going to keep doing this. And then what else this is super important. I need to have this going. I have my big, this is getting hot. I had it turned on low. I have this big, beautiful 13-inch double-handled fry pan. It's cast iron. It's from Staub. It's brand new for me. I have used it several times, kind of practicing with it. It is fantastic. So you know how I love cast iron. So it's cast iron, but it is 13 inches. There are few pans, y'all, that are 13 inches large. And so the surface area that I get to be able to cook these ribeyes and get a good sear, there's really nothing like it. So I've got that preheating, and we want it to be really, really hot. It's not on high, but it's on, I don't know, about medium high. We are almost done with our asparagus. Delicious. Okay, so here are my asparagus. Easy as that. Look at that. Y'all, this dinner probably takes from beginning to end maybe 25 minutes. Like really, maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes at the most, because it all happens like really quickly. Sear, and then in the oven. Sear, in the oven, and that's it. Okay, I'm gonna give a little drizzle of olive oil on my asparagus, salt and pepper it. And when we come back, we're gonna prep our meat, give it a good sear, and stick it in the oven. This is Cooking Today.
Cooking Today, sponsored by West Rock Coffee Company.
Hi, welcome back. We are making beautiful, easy indoor ribeye steaks and asparagus that we're gonna roast off in the oven. It is quick and it's easy, and it's basically, you're gonna wash just a handful of pans, not a big fancy dish where we're doing this skillet and that skillet and this mixing bowl. You've seen how we can really go through some mixing bowls here, right? We have a ton of cleaning up that we usually do when we're cooking around here, but not today. This is a one-pot wonder. It's great. It's all gonna happen on your sheet pan. So we've cut down the stalks on our asparagus, lined them up on this baking sheet, given just a little drizzle of olive oil. I have my big, hearty, double-handled cast iron skillet that is preheating, and I'm gonna give a little swirl of olive oil in here. Not tons, but just a little. Yep, and it's hot. You can really see it start to smoke. Then I have 2 ribeye steaks right here. And all I'm gonna do, and you've seen us do this before, it is key, y'all. This is key to good flavored meat, is rub these with salt and pepper really well on the outside and sear them. Now, we're using these ribeyes. I have done this recipe with a sirloin steak, which actually costs a little bit less. And you can certainly cut a corner if you want, because ribeyes are a little bit more of an expensive, cut of meat, but they're awful good. And it's just that fat that's in them that you really cannot beat. So I'm gonna give these a good crust on the outside. I rarely, and you know this, I rarely skip this step, because just kind of steamed meat or baked meat, it's not very exciting. And this is where the good flavor comes. Also from the roast recipe that I make, we sear, but this little crust is gonna be your favorite bite of this whole thing. Okay, so we've given that a really good little douse down in salt and pepper, and we have our skillet nice and high. And then we have our asparagus just sitting here. Let's go ahead, since I've got my clean fingers, I'm gonna give this a good little sprinkle of salt and a good little sprinkle of pepper. You could do a couple things here. We're basically gonna just roast these. So if you wanted to do, add in some like roasted shallots in there, if you wanted to stick in some like garlic in there and let those roast alongside, you could. You could throw some lemon on there if you wanted to roast a little lemon in here, and those juices would be really good and come in, and get on top of your asparagus. You can kind of play this by ear, whatever you love. This is just super simple, and it's easy, and it's pretty. The color is so nice. Okay, I'm going to set my tray right on top of our asparagus now that we have oiled it and salt and peppered it. And I'm just gonna give it a little kind of a nestle down. See how easy that was? And now we've got our preheated skillet. I'm going to put these ribeyes on. Pretty, pretty, pretty. And we're going to let those sit without stirring them. We want them to really sit there, and we want them to get a nice, flat, even crust and a nice seal on that pan. And then once it's time for those to move and they can actually, you know, separate from the pan, you know that you've gotten that good crust. But if you start to move a piece of meat in a skillet and it doesn't move, then that means it's still working on getting that good sear, and you don't want to pick it up and move it. So we're going to let that sit for just a minute or so. And one of the things that we actually talked about before we started this show is a lot of people think that when you have a steak, the only thing that you can do with it is grill it. And my husband is in the big green egg club. You know, he loves that, and, you know, gives him hair on his chest, and he, you know, all that, men. And it's, in my opinion, I think it's kind of hard. I don't really know how to work it, and I don't really know how to do charcoal and all that. So really my go-to on a steak is to just sear it and bake it in the oven, kind of like we did the fillets for Valentine's Day. Delicious, delicious. The key again is searing, 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 searing. So this is the way that I do our steaks. I'm going to check it and see. And it's resisting just a little bit, so I don't think I'm going to move it. It should pick up without any trouble at all. So we're going to let that sit. So while those are finishing up, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our cream sauce. Oh my goodness, there is nothing like this. I have a little bitty saucepan, and what we're going to do is melt a little bit of butter and saute garlic, which I can totally start working on right now while we're waiting on our good sear. Garlic and chives and shallots and a little cream sauce. And at the end, we stir in Gorgonzola. Y'all, that flavor on this yummy salty steak is so good. You're gonna love it. So we're gonna let these finish searing. And then when we come back, we're gonna start on our sauce. This is Cooking Today.
Iced tea, sponsored by Lipton.
Hi, welcome back. You should smell it in here. Browned meat, brown salty meat. It smells so good. So we have seared our steaks on both sides. We have our oven preheated to 425. Oh my goodness. And then we have our asparagus cut, oiled, and salt and peppered right here on this sheet pan. So all we're gonna do, this is super technical, so y'all watch, there's a whole lot to know. We're gonna take this ribeye and lay it over that row of asparagus. And we're gonna take this ribeye and lay it over this row of asparagus. Now you could do this with 3 or 4 steaks. What you would want to do in that case is sear them probably separately in your pan. You don't ever want to crowd meat in a pan, because then what it'll do is it'll steam itself and it doesn't get really good and crispy and browned. And so you would want to do it maybe in batches, but you could easily, there's room here easily to put a couple more steaks on top of your sheet pan. But I just have 2 today, and so I've just got those laid over my asparagus. Smells so, so good. And that little bit of fat, a little tiny bite of that, so good, y'all. Okay, so remember I said that I have the oven preheated to 425. And we are going to put this in the oven on that, and I move my rack up. And we need to set a timer for about 10 minutes or 12 minutes or so. Now, according to your preference on the doneness of your steak, you can adjust. You can adjust the cook time on that. If you like it a little bit more rare, you can certainly cut it down. I usually like to do mine about 10 or 12 minutes or so, and then we'll tint it and let it rest, and then the temperature will come up just a little bit. But you know, a little bit of like a medium with a little pink inside there is just so good. Keeps that meat super tender. You can serve these on a plate as one big honking piece of meat and work on it with your fork and your knife. Or if you needed to kind of spread it to feed a crowd, you could put it on your cutting board and make really pretty nice, biased, pretty pieces of it, and then kind of spread the wealth a little bit. Does that make sense if you needed to do that? Okay, let's start on this cream sauce. It's pretty amazing, for real, amazing. We love Gorgonzola around here. Okay, so I've got this big pan. I'm just gonna set off to the side. You know, it kind of breaks my heart to leave all those good tidbits down in the bottom of that pan. I mean, all the flavor that's down there, it's pretty good. Here's what we're gonna do to make this delicious cream sauce. We're gonna take a couple of tablespoons of butter. Now this sauce is rich, 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 rich with flavor, rich with full fat. It just is, it's delicious. And so it's rich enough that you're not gonna just drown your steak in it. You're just gonna do a nice little drizzle and maybe just enough to put on your asparagus. I'm gonna go ahead and use this same burner, y'all, because it's the one that was already going and it's nice and warm. So I have a couple of tablespoons of butter. Down inside there, I've gone ahead and chopped a clove of garlic, kind of minced it down pretty well. You don't want it to be huge pieces of garlic because you're gonna actually get these little bites. And so we want there to be, you know, pretty tiny little pieces of garlic. And then you know my love for shallots. We're gonna slice a shallot just into small rings. And I'm keeping my ear to my saucepan here so that it doesn't burn. If that butter browns just a tiny bit, then that's perfectly fine. You know, brown butter, it's the thing. It's so yummy. But I don't want it to burn. I just want it to brown a little. And then what we're gonna do is saute just one of these little shallots in that butter for just a minute or so. I'm gonna do these little tiny rings, little baby skinny rings. Okay, just basically cut it like that. And then you know what? I don't think I'm gonna use both sides. I think I'm just gonna use this one side. I think that'll be plenty. I'm gonna give that a little chop. Spread the love a little bit more. There we go, that's good. You know how I feel about butter and garlic and onions. It's the best. We say that there should be a candle. We just talked about this earlier today. Holiday candle. Smells like butter and onions and garlic. It's the truth. Somebody is missing out on a fortune for not making that. Okay, our little butter has melted. I'm gonna go ahead and put in our shallots and saute our garlic in there as well. When we come back, we're gonna add a little cream, stir in a little Gorgonzola, and finish it off. In just a few minutes, our steaks are gonna be ready, and that's it. Not a piece of cake, prettiest meal ever. This is Cooking Today. Y'all, I mean, are there any better things than this? I've got my Lipton sweet tea that we just poured. I can't wait to show you what I've done to kind of jazz up this class. We're gonna do that soon. There is nothing better than sweet tea, gang. This cream sauce is heaven. You could like skip the steak and the asparagus and just eat this, if you ask me. My mom would eat that with just a piece of butter, bread, and butter. We would just dip it in there and go to town. The steaks are beautiful. I've put them in the oven. They have cooked at 425 for about 12 minutes. At the very, very end, I turned the broiler on really quickly just to get a good, nice, dark, pretty brown on them. And then all you gotta do serve that beauty. You can tint these and let them wait. Look at the size of that steak. I got a small plate. Ooh, it's still sizzling a little bit. I'm gonna put this one right here. And then we're gonna plate that asparagus right beside there. And just before we spoon that pretty sauce on there, I'm gonna stir in just a couple of chives. You don't wanna do them at the very beginning because they'll wilt. So you wanna do them right at the end. Do chives in our pretty sauce. Ladle that Gorgonzola cream right on top of that steak. Put that asparagus right beside it, or shoot, pile it up on top and make a beautiful restaurant quality dinner. Pretty plate, delicious food, and you know, our favorite sweet tea, and you've got quite a meal. And look at the cleanup. That's all there is to it. Piece of cake, guys. I hope you'll try this recipe at home and love every bite. This is Cooking Today.
Cooking Today, sponsored by West Rock Coffee Company. Kitchenware is provided by Una Mays. Groceries provided by Harps, Hometown Fresh. Online Elements sponsored by Fayetteville Farmers Market.